There is one detail from Dolly Parton's childhood that stops most people cold when they first hear it, and it has nothing to do with her music, her movies, or the legend the world built around her. When she arrived into this world in January of 1946, born inside a one-room cabin in the Smoky Mountains of Sevier County, Tennessee, her father had nothing to give the doctor who delivered her except a sack of cornmeal. That was the price of her birth. Not cash, not a check. Cornmeal, handed over like a bill had come due, because Robert Lee Parton had nothing else to offer for the life of his fourth child. Dolly Parton would go on to sell out stadiums on multiple continents, write over 3,000 songs, and become one of the most recognized voices in the history of American country music. None of that changes where she started, and none of it erases what getting from there to here actually cost her. Robert Lee Parton could not read or write. On legal documents, he left an X where his name was supposed to go, and he worked every job the land and the season would allow him, trying to feed a family that eventually grew to 14 people under one roof. 12 children, 2 parents, and a cabin with no running water and no insulation against the winters that came hard off those Tennessee mountains. Dolly has described lying in her bed as a small girl and watching frost form on the inside of the walls, wearing dresses sewn from flour sacks, sharing sleeping space with multiple siblings at once. The poverty was real and physical and constant, and she has never pretended otherwise. What she has also never done is pretend that hardship was the whole story. Her mother, Avie Lee, filled that cabin with music the way other people fill rooms with heat, singing old Appalachian hymns and folk songs from morning until the work of the day finally ran out. And that is where Dolly's voice was born. Not in Nashville, not in a recording studio, but in a cold room with a woman who understood that some things cannot be taken from you no matter how little you have. But here's the thing about her father that people rarely talk about. Robert Lee Parton loved his daughter with everything in him, and he also never fully understood what she did for a living. The gap between the mountain life he knew and the industry she was moving toward was simply too wide for any bridge to span, and Dolly has spoken about that distance with a very specific kind of grief. Not anger, not blame, just a quiet sorrow that never quite found resolution. She wanted her father to see her, to truly see the things she had built and who she had become, and she spent decades sitting with the uncertainty of whether he ever did. 17 years old and the morning after high school graduation, she packed a single bag, picked up her guitar, and boarded a bus to Nashville, while her family stood in the yard and watched her go. Her mother was crying. Dolly turned away so they wouldn't see her do the same. Nashville in those years wasn't particularly interested in a mountain girl with an enormous voice, bigger hair, and no intention of dimming either one to make the industry more comfortable. The men who ran country music in the 1960s looked at her and saw something that needed to be managed and reshaped, something that needed its edges sanded down, and they told her so repeatedly, change how you look, soften how you sound, fit the format they had already decided on. None of that landed, and the refusal cost her years of struggle that the mythology of her career tends to skip over. The better part of a decade passed before a real break arrived, and even then it came attached to one of the most complicated professional relationships of her life. Porter Wagoner, an established country star with his own television show, gave her a spot on that show in 1967, and in doing so, opened a door that genuinely mattered. The problem was that what came with the opportunity felt, by her own careful account, more like ownership than partnership. When she finally decided she was ready to leave and build something of her own, Wagoner sued her for $3 million, a legal fight that eventually settled but left damage that no settlement could fully repair. She wrote him a song to say goodbye, poured everything unspoken into it, and handed it to him without explaining what it was. The song was, "I Will Always Love You," and he didn't understand what it meant until she told him. But what the cameras never showed was the private life running parallel to all of this, the one she has protected with more care than almost anything else she owns. Carl Dean was standing outside a Nashville laundromat on the very first day she arrived in the city, and by May of 1966 they were married. He became, and has remained for nearly 60 years, one of the most deliberately private spouses in the history of American celebrity. Carl has almost never appeared in public alongside her, has never given a single interview, has stayed home while his wife circled the globe. and has done all of this without appearing to want anything from the world's attention. Their love story, in many ways, holds a genuine beauty. It is also a love story that was built on a foundation of sustained absence, and Dolly has been honest about what that costs. She has described sitting in hotel rooms at 2 in the morning in cities that blur together after enough tours, missing her husband with a loneliness that never made headlines because it wasn't dramatic enough to be news. It was just quiet and persistent and real. The sacrifice at the center of their marriage runs in both directions. She has always known that, and the knowing hasn't made it lighter to carry. And then there is the subject she handles most carefully of all: children. Dolly and Carl have none, and while she has kept the specific reasons close, what she has allowed the public to understand is that this is the one place in her life where something sits unfinished. A pregnancy she lost is documented in her own words, mentioned without ceremony, carried without a public grief ritual, which somehow makes it feel heavier rather than lighter. She has redirected that maternal love into her nieces, her nephews, the families of her hometown, and into the Imagination Library, the program she founded that has now delivered over 200 million free books to children around the world. She has said she was maybe meant to be everybody's Dolly rather than any single child's mother, and when she says it, the words do most of their work in the pause that comes right after. If this story is moving you, please subscribe, because this channel covers exactly these kinds of stories, the ones behind the headlines, the ones that take longer than a headline to tell. Decades of performance have left a physical record on her body that most fans have only glimpsed sideways. A partial hysterectomy changed her in ways she found genuinely difficult to put into language. Back problems accumulated the way they do when you never stop touring. The elaborate wigs that became her signature were not originally a creative choice, but a practical response to significant hair loss that arrived earlier than anyone would choose. And she did what she has always done with vulnerability, which is find a way to wear it on the outside until it looks intentional. That takes a particular kind of strength that doesn't always get named as strength. Public criticism has followed her in a form that tends to follow women who present as consistently warm and generous. A certain kind of observer looks at someone that decent and decides it must be constructed, that no one sustains that quality without a calculation underneath it. And Dolly has had to live inside that suspicion for most of her adult life. She has navigated it without bitterness, but she has also let slip, in quieter moments, that being so widely loved and so consistently misread carries its own particular loneliness. When she turned down the Presidential Medal of Freedom and then turned it down a second time under a different administration, the decision was consistent with everything she has always been. She belongs to no political tribe, refuses to be used as a symbol by any faction, and has spent her career being a person rather than a position. The cost of that refusal is real, because a country that demands you choose a side eventually finds a way to resent you for not choosing theirs. 79 years old now, and she still performs, still writes, still builds, still gives at a pace that exhausts the people around her. The Imagination Library keeps running. The tours keep going. The smile that the entire world recognizes keeps appearing on cue, the one that seems to say, "Hold on, we are going to be fine." But there was a moment in an interview not so long ago when someone asked her directly about regret, and she paused in a way that she rarely does, and what came out wasn't polished. She said she sometimes wondered what her life might have looked like if she had moved through it differently. Not a different career, but a different way of living inside the career she chose. Whether she had given so much of herself to the work and the audience and the relentless forward motion of it all that the people closest to her ended up holding less than they deserved. She didn't frame it as a confession. She said it the way a person says something they have turned over in private for a very long time, and finally decided that honesty matters more than performing contentment. And in that moment, the icon disappeared entirely, and what remained was a woman in her late 70s, looking back across a life of extraordinary achievement and extraordinary sacrifice, and simply telling the truth about what the exchange had cost. That is worth more than any award she has ever accepted. A girl born in a mountain cabin, her delivery paid for with a sack of cornmeal, who gave the world everything she had and spent a quiet lifetime wondering whether she had kept enough for herself. She deserves to be seen that way, the whole of her, not just the parts that fit on a poster. If this story reached you, please subscribe. This channel covers the real ones, the stories that live behind the headlines and take more than a moment to understand.